Millionaire sees the stepmother mistreating his daughter. What he did shocked everyone. Daniel Carter was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in America. At just 36, he had built a cybersecurity empire from a small garage office. With the sharp eyes of a man who had faced countless challenges, no one could have guessed that behind that tough exterior was a father who had once lost everything. After the sudden death of his wife Emily in a car accident, Daniel was left to raise their young daughter Lily alone. She was only 2 years old. The grief was overwhelming, and Daniel buried himself in work, both to cope with the pain and to secure a stable future for Lily. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't fill the void left in the heart of a little girl who missed her mother's warmth. 3 quiet, lonely years passed before Daniel started to believe that Lily needed a maternal figure, someone who could teach her how to tie her hair, hold her through nightmares, and whisper, "It's going to be okay," when the world felt too big and scary. That's when he met Vanessa, a beautiful, seemingly kind woman who exuded a calming, nurturing energy and appeared to love children. The wedding came quickly. Life seemed peaceful, and for a while it felt like the missing piece had finally fallen into place. But sometimes nightmares don't arrive in the dark. Sometimes they wear a familiar face and smile gently in the daylight. That afternoon started like any other. Daniel had just wrapped up a crucial meeting in San Francisco and decided on a whim to head home earlier than planned. He wanted to surprise Lily. His little girl loved surprises more than any expensive toy he could buy. On the drive back, he pictured her running into his arms, squealing, "Daddy!" followed by cake and cartoons on the couch. He had no idea that within minutes his entire world would shatter. As he stepped through the back door of their estate, something felt off. No music, no television, no joyful sounds of Lily playing. Just silence. Daniel frowned. He climbed the stairs quietly, his heart beginning to pound, the kind of instinct only a father knows. Then came the sobbing, a child's cry from Lily's room, and a harsh, angry voice. "Shut up! You ungrateful little brat, you drive me insane!" Daniel froze. That was Vanessa. I just wanted some water," Lily's tiny voice quivered. "Water? What do you think you are, a princess? You're nothing but a burden. If it weren't for your father, I wouldn't be stuck with you." He didn't wait another second. Daniel burst through the door, and the sight before him made his stomach drop. Lily was curled up in the corner, clinging to her teddy bear, her eyes red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Vanessa, the woman he had once trusted with his child, stood over her with folded arms, cold and indifferent. "What the hell are you doing to my daughter?" Daniel's voice cracked with fury. Vanessa spun around, startled, then quickly plastered on her usual fake calm. "Daniel, you're home early. I was just teaching her a lesson. She's been acting up." "Don't call her that," Daniel growled. His eyes never left Lily. The little girl ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Daddy, she yelled at me again. I'm scared." Daniel bent down and scooped her up, feeling her tiny body trembling in his arms. "You're safe now, sweetheart. Daddy's here. No one's going to hurt you anymore." Vanessa tried to regain control. "Daniel, you're overreacting. That child is manipulative. You spoil her, and that's why she's so defiant." Daniel turned, his voice low but cutting like a blade. "I heard everything. You called her a burden. You insulted her mother. You crossed a line." Lily whispered into his ear, barely audible, "Please, don't make me stay with her again." That was all he needed to hear. Daniel stood tall, holding his daughter close. He looked Vanessa in the eye and said, "You have 1 hour to pack your things and leave this house. And you are never coming near my child again." Vanessa screamed, argued, tried to twist the narrative. But Daniel had already turned away, carrying Lily, the little girl he now vowed to protect with every breath he had. That day, the California sky remained clear and blue. But inside Daniel Carter's heart, a storm had just begun. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat beside Lily's bed, quietly watching her as she clutched her teddy bear and drifted into uneasy slumber after the chaos. But even her sleep wasn't peaceful. From time to time, she trembled, murmuring broken words, as if running from a nightmare she couldn't escape. Daniel felt like his heart was being ripped apart. He couldn't stop asking himself, how had he not seen it sooner? How had he been so blind, so trusting, that he allowed that woman to be near his daughter for so long? How many times had Lily looked at him with fearful eyes, and he brushed it off as a child's sensitivity? How many times had she tried to speak, only for him to be too wrapped up in work, dismissing her concerns as just a phase? The memories came rushing back, each one like a sharp blade slicing into his conscience. He had failed to protect his daughter. That guilt haunted Daniel through the entire night. And when the first rays of dawn broke through the window, he was still there, his eyes weary, but his heart filled with a resolve stronger than ever before. The very next morning, Daniel canceled every business trip scheduled for the next 3 months. He reorganized the company's structure, handing over interim leadership to his deputy. All meetings were now restricted to within a radius that allowed him to be home before Lily's bedtime. "She needs me," Daniel told the executive board, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And if this company can't survive while I do what I must as a father, then I don't need it." The room fell silent with shock, but Daniel didn't care. From that day forward, he made breakfast with Lily each morning, took her to art class, and picked her up on time. He learned how to braid her hair, listened to her silly stories, and spent quiet afternoons simply sitting next to her, saying nothing, just being present. Still, deep inside, Daniel knew something else. No matter how much time he gave her, he couldn't be with Lily every hour of every day. And she needed someone trained, someone kind, someone who could help her heal from what had been done, someone who could be there when he couldn't. But this time he swore that person would not be chosen for convenience or for appearance's sake, not because they looked kind or sounded professional. This time it had to be someone who was truly right. Until then, Daniel would do it all himself. Grace Taylor never imagined that loving children could become her life's mission, but for her it didn't begin with a textbook or a college course. It began in a tiny, crowded apartment in Sacramento, where she was the eldest of 4 siblings and learned to change diapers, soothe colicky babies, and calm a scared little brother while her mother worked late nights. Her family had little. Rent, overdue bills, and an empty fridge were constants. But from those early struggles, Grace learned patience, gentleness, and most of all, empathy. She pursued a degree in special education, followed by a certification in child trauma therapy. For nearly 7 years, Grace worked tirelessly in children's crisis centers. The work was never easy, but every time a silent child smiled for the first time in months, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. So when a high-end agency called about a live-in position with a wealthy family in South California, Grace hesitated. Full-time care, a 4-year-old girl with signs of trauma. As the coordinator described the case, Grace felt something stirred deep inside her. "The little girl's name is Lily," the woman said. "She lost her mother and may have suffered emotional abuse from a stepmother. Her father's looking for someone to help her heal." Grace didn't speak for a few seconds. She hadn't met Lily, but already felt a strange connection. 3 days later, Grace stood in front of the Carter estate. She wore a simple dress, no makeup, and carried an old fabric backpack filled with books, colored paper, and tiny stuffed animals. Things she knew kids often reached for when words failed. When Daniel opened the door, he was momentarily taken aback, not by her appearance, but by her eyes. They didn't scan the house, didn't calculate wealth, didn't flinch at luxury. They were the eyes of someone used to placing a child's world at the center of her own. "Hi, I'm Grace Taylor," she said gently, shaking his hand. "I brought a few little friends Lily might like to meet, if she feels up to it." Daniel nodded, speaking little. He led her into the living room, where Lily sat curled up with a pillow, watching the stranger with quiet caution. Grace didn't approach. Instead, she sat on the floor at a respectful distance, opened a picture book of princesses, and said softly, "I know a brave princess who lives in a magical castle. She has a secret. Would you like to hear it?" Lily tilted her head slightly. She said nothing, but the fear in her eyes seemed to ease. From behind, Daniel observed with quiet awe. Grace didn't force interaction. She didn't fake warmth. She didn't play nice for show. Throughout the interview, Grace focused more on Lily than on him. She commented on the girls' toys, the drawings taped to the fridge, and every time Lily said something, no matter how small, Grace nodded with a smile, as if her words were treasures. When Daniel asked about her caregiving approach, Grace replied, "I'm not here to replace anyone. I'm here to listen. Children don't need perfection. They need honesty." As the meeting neared its end, Lily stepped a little closer, pointing at one of the stuffed animals Grace had brought. "Is she your friend?" she asked softly. Grace nodded gently. "Yes, and if you'd like, she could be your friend too." Daniel saw something flicker in Lily's eyes then. A tiny light, fragile but unmistakable. After so many dark days, perhaps, the first glimmer of light had arrived. And in that very moment, when Lily's eyes softened when she spoke to a stranger for the first time in weeks, Daniel Carter knew he had to give Grace a chance. The next morning, Grace officially started her job at the Carter home. Daniel woke up earlier than usual. He made coffee, checked the security cameras, and wiped the kitchen counter even though it was already spotless. He didn't say it aloud, but the nervous energy in his movements said everything. Grace arrived exactly at 7 a.m., carrying her worn backpack and the same warm smile. No makeup, no perfume, just a calm presence. Pressureless, unintrusive. Daniel found it rare. "Lily's still asleep," he murmured. "She usually wakes around 8. "Perfect," Grace replied. "That gives us an hour to set the tone for a gentle morning." Daniel gave a faint smile. Part of him was relieved she didn't ask about hours, salary, or perks, only about how to start Lily's day right. When Lily came downstairs, still in her pajamas and clinging to her teddy bear, her eyes locked on Grace with quiet caution. But again, Grace didn't rush in. She simply smiled and whispered, "Good morning, Princess Lily. I brought peanut butter sandwiches, if your highness approves." Lily said nothing, just sat next to Daniel and began her breakfast. But she kept glancing at Grace, more curious than afraid. The morning unfolded gently, but it was also filled with tiny tests, and Grace recognized every one of them. Lily spilled orange juice on the table. Grace didn't scold. She said, "I spill things too. Want to clean it together?" Lily tossed toys across the living room, then pretended not to hear when Grace called. Instead of insisting, Grace sat beside her and told a story, subtly weaving in a lesson, until Lily joined in on her own. Each response surprised Daniel. There were no forced smiles, no sugary voices, no reprimands, just calm patience, something Lily hadn't experienced from anyone since her mother passed. At one point, Lily looked up and asked, "Will you yell if I get the sofa dirty?" Grace smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's forehead. "No, sweetheart, I won't yell, but I can show you how to fix it, if you'd like to learn together." Daniel turned away for a moment. His throat tightened, eyes stung. That one question, so small yet so revealing, reminded him just how deep the wounds had gone, and how gently Grace was helping to mend them. He remembered all the times Lily cried over little mistakes, how Vanessa twisted them into reasons to humiliate her, convincing her she was never good enough. But now, hearing Lily's question, Daniel understood. His daughter wasn't misbehaving. She was testing, not to defy, but to protect herself. By late afternoon, Daniel returned to the living room after a video call and saw something that made him pause. Grace was sitting on the rug with Lily, building a tower with colorful wooden blocks. They weren't talking much, but they were focused, calm, connected. Between them stood a bridge made of tiny pieces, carefully balanced. Daniel stood silently for a few seconds. Neither of them noticed him, but he knew. That bridge wasn't just a toy. It was a bridge of trust, being built one piece at a time, through patience, through kindness, through quiet consistency. And from that very afternoon, when Daniel saw Lily and Grace building a toy bridge in the middle of the living room, he began to understand. Some things don't need to be said to be felt. It was the feeling of safety, trust, being restored, and something quiet yet undeniably real, beginning to grow. As time passed, Daniel found himself trusting Grace more and more, not just because she was good at her job, but because of the way she existed in Lily's world, gently, thoughtfully, honestly. She didn't rush to bond, never overstepped, but moved through their lives like a quiet warmth, returning to a home that had been cold for far too long. Daniel realized he was drawn not just to what she did for his daughter, but to who she was, her calm presence, her patience, the way she listened without judgment, with those eyes that always seemed to truly see people. Evenings in the Carter home began to feel different. They'd have dinner together, not out of routine, but because it felt natural. Lily would talk about her art class, Grace would joke about the world's fattest neighbor cat, and Daniel would sit back, sometimes tossing in a dry joke, mostly just watching them with quiet joy. Warm kitchen lights, the smell of toasted bread, and the sound of a child's laughter, once mundane, now the most precious parts of Daniel's life. After dinner, Grace washed the dishes, Daniel wiped the counters, and Lily colored quietly on the floor. Everyone had their place, and for the first time in years, it all felt right. One evening, Lily went to bed early. Daniel and Grace stayed on the back porch, sipping ginger tea. Daniel opened up about the days after Emily's death, the panic, the fear of failing as a father. Grace didn't interrupt. She simply listened, with that kind of silence that feels like shelter. Then it was her turn. She spoke about her childhood, about her mother, a night shift nurse who was rarely home, about her siblings and the weight of responsibility, and how that led her to study therapy to help kids like the one she used to be. Daniel had never talked this openly to anyone, and he had never felt as safe as he did sitting beside Grace in the quiet hum of crickets and wind. Feelings, clearly, were growing, but neither of them said a word. Daniel kept reminding himself, Grace was his daughter's caregiver. And more than that, Lily had just come out of something traumatic. She needed stability, not emotional confusion from the adults around her. Grace, who had seen countless children shaken by the instability of adult choices, understood better than anyone where the line had to be drawn. So even as their glances lingered longer, even as their smiles held something more, they both maintained a respectful, gentle distance. A distance that somehow felt intimate. But children often sense things long before adults are ready to admit them. One morning, as Grace was brushing Lily's hair, the little girl said, "Miss Grace, Daddy looks at you the way he looks at the picture of Mommy." Grace paused. Her hand froze mid-stroke. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" she asked softly. "Like a little sad, but also happy. The kind of love that makes people smile without knowing." Grace didn't respond, but something shifted quietly inside her. That night, Daniel heard the story from Lily, and for the first time, instead of panicking or pulling back, he smiled, slowly, but with something real in his chest. Whatever this was, It had taken root, and like a flower in the early morning sun, it was beginning to bloom. Softly, patiently, but with a truth that couldn't be denied. But even as something warm and real began to bloom, Daniel couldn't fully silence the scars that still lived beneath his skin. Trust, though nurtured with patience and sincerity, remained fragile for a man who had once been betrayed by the person he trusted most. And sometimes, just as the heart begins to open, fear finds its way back, not with a knock, not with a warning, but quietly, returning in the familiar shape of doubt and self-protection. This time aimed at the one person who had only ever tried to heal what had once been broken. Even as days with Grace and Lily became warmer and softer, Daniel couldn't fully let go. The feeling came suddenly one evening, as he watched Grace kneel to tie Lily's shoelaces, her smile gentle, her eyes full of care. It was a perfect moment. Too perfect. And that perfection stirred something uneasy inside him. Daniel's chest tightened, like a quiet warning from within. "You thought Vanessa was perfect too," the old voice whispered. He started noticing the small things. Grace rarely spoke of friends, had no social media, kept her personal life private. She always answered questions honestly and consistently, yet somehow that made Daniel more suspicious. He didn't talk to her about it, didn't tell anyone, not even himself. Instead, he called an old contact, a private investigator who once worked with his security firm. "I need you to look into someone," Daniel said. "Not because she's done anything wrong. I just need to be sure." Days later, the file arrived. Grace Taylor, born in Sacramento, eldest of 4. Degree from California State University in special education. Worked at 2 child trauma centers. No criminal record, no debts, no ties to anything questionable. Every detail matched what she had told him. And the final note, no red flags. She's exactly who she says she is. Daniel stared at the folder on his desk. He should have felt relieved, and part of him did, but the rest was shame. He had doubted someone who never deserved to be doubted. He'd repeated the same mistake, letting fear distort the present. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel knocked gently on Grace's door. She looked up from her book and smiled, that familiar smile. But one glance at his face made it fade. "Is something wrong?" she asked softly. Daniel stepped in, sat at the edge of the chair, hands clasped tight. He looked at her for a long moment before finally saying what had been gnawing at him all day. "I had someone look into your past." The room went still. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Grace didn't react right away. She just looked at him, as if trying to understand. "Why would you do that?" she asked. Her voice wasn't angry, just hurt. Daniel swallowed. "Because I trusted the wrong person once, and that hurt my daughter. I won't let that happen again." Grace nodded slowly. Her eyes weren't warm, but they weren't cold either, just sad. "I understand you're scared," she said, "but you could have asked me, or trusted what you've seen, what Lily feels. I've never asked for anything, Daniel. I just wanted to help." He bowed his head. "I know, and I'm truly sorry. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I still don't fully trust myself." A long silence passed between them. Then Grace exhaled, closed her book, and whispered, "Trust isn't always clean or easy. Sometimes it grows through cracks. I forgive you, Daniel, but that doesn't mean it didn't hurt." Daniel met her eyes, and what he saw wasn't betrayal. It was someone learning to forgive. He nodded, barely audible. "I'll never put that weight on you again." And in the quiet that followed, something was released. A wall, a wound, maybe just a fear. One step back. so that one day they might step forward, together. The night Grace forgave him, Daniel couldn't sleep. He lay in the dark, listening to Lily's soft breathing from the room next door, thinking, I nearly lost the kindest person I've ever met, because of fear. But the miracle was, she stayed. After that conversation, something shifted between Daniel and Grace. No more stolen glances quickly turned away. No more unspoken distance built on self-defense. Instead, there was quiet acknowledgement, subtle but real. Daniel started speaking to Grace with warmer tones, inviting her to stay for dinner, just because. Please. Grace, in turn, no longer declined when he asked her to sit a little longer after Lily's bedtime, to drink tea and talk about everything from books to childhood memories, even their unnamed fears. The feelings had always been there. Now they simply stopped hiding. But this wasn't a whirlwind romance. There were no sudden kisses in the rain, no dramatic confessions under moonlight, because they both knew one little person came first, always. Lily. They chose to take it slow. Daniel didn't want Lily to feel confused or displaced. Grace, having seen how children absorb every emotional ripple, knew too well how adult haste can leave kids holding the pieces. Lily remained her bright, observant self, and, as always, her innocence brought clarity the adults weren't ready for. One afternoon, while the three of them played with building blocks in the living room, Lily looked up, resting her chin on her hand. "Daddy, do you like Miss Grace?" The question landed like a small stone in still water. Daniel froze. Grace laughed nervously, but Lily's eyes stayed serious, like she was asking something that really mattered. Daniel took a breath and smiled. "I like Miss Grace because she's kind to you." "No," Lily said, shaking her head. "I mean, do you like her like in the movies, where people kiss and stuff?" Grace turned red. Daniel chuckled awkwardly. "Well," he hesitated, "sometimes grown-ups feel things like that. But Miss Grace and we care about you first, more than anything. Do you feel okay about that?" Lily paused, thinking hard. Then she nodded. "As long as you and Miss Grace don't disappear like the mean lady did." The room went quiet. Grace placed a gentle hand over Lily's. "I won't disappear, not unless you want me to." Lily shook her head firmly, hugging her. "I don't want that." Daniel watched, his eyes stinging. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Daniel and Grace sat on the back porch like always. But this time, there was no quiet hesitation between them. Daniel slowly reached for her hand. "I've never rushed love," he said softly. "And I'm not about to start. But if you'll let me, I'd like to love you. Slowly, gently, one day at a time." Grace looked at him and nodded. No words needed. Their love wasn't loud. It wasn't fast. It arrived like the sunrise, quiet, patient, but warm enough to thaw even the coldest corners. And so, love had bloomed, not like fireworks, but like a quiet fire in winter. The evenings on the porch, the silent embraces, the glances that spoke more than words, all of it built something steady, something deep. But for Daniel, love, as beautiful as it was, wasn't quite enough. Because from the moment he saw Grace holding Lily that first time, he hadn't been dreaming of a romance. He'd been dreaming of a family. A few weeks later, as spring returned to the backyard, Daniel called Lily outside to the same garden where the three of them had planted flowers the year before. "Sweetheart," he said gently, "there's something important I want to ask you." Lily looked up, hands covered in dirt. "Ask me. If someday I wanted to do something really special with Miss Grace, would that be okay? I mean, if I wanted her to become part of our family, really part of it." Lily tilted her head, eyes lighting up. "You mean she'd be my new mom?" Daniel smiled. Only if you're okay with it. Only if you want that." Lily was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "As long as she doesn't disappear, I want her to stay. Forever." And that was all Daniel needed to hear. 3 days later, on a quiet afternoon, Grace was called into the backyard with a simple note from Lily. "There's a surprise waiting for you." When she stepped outside, Grace saw Lily standing in the middle of the tulip bed, the same flowers they had planted together. Daniel was there too, holding a small box. He dropped to one knee. Looking into Grace's eyes, the eyes that had walked with him through so much pain and healing, he spoke. "Grace," his voice trembling as he knelt in the garden where their journey began, "you brought light into the darkest corners of our lives. You didn't just help Lily smile, you gave her a reason to trust again. And me? You helped me believe that second chances aren't just stories. Will you be the heart of our family and my partner for all the days to come?" Grace covered her mouth, tears streaming silently. She nodded. Lily rushed over, wrapping her arms around both of them, shouting with uncontainable joy, "Now we're a real family, aren't we, Daddy?" Daniel held his daughter close, pulling Grace into his arms, and for the first time in years, he felt whole. From the moment Grace nodded in that flower-filled garden, everything felt a little lighter. Not because life had become perfect, but because they had chosen each other, not to escape pain, but to walk through it together. The wedding took place 3 weeks later, right in the backyard, a space now sacred with soft shared memories. No extravagant dress, no loud crowd, no booming music. Just the closest people, rows of wooden chairs, blooming tulips, and sunlight falling gently through the trees. And Lily, in a puffed white dress, hair braided with pink ribbons, scattering petals down the aisle like she was scripting the next chapter of their fairy tale. "I'm the little princess today," Lily whispered to Grace before the ceremony. "But you're the queen." Grace smiled, eyes misty. "No, sweetheart. I'm just someone lucky enough to become the mother of a real princess." Daniel held Grace's hands in that garden, the very place where everything had begun. "I can't promise I'll never make mistakes," he said, looking into her eyes. "But I promise I'll never walk away when I could choose to stay. I'll be here, listening, learning how to love you better, and being the best father I can be for Lily." Grace held his hands tighter, voice trembling. "I can't promise I won't be afraid again, but I promise not to run. I'll choose you, every day through easy and hard, and I will love Lily as if she's always been a part of me." Lily clapped loudly as they kissed, their first as husband and wife. "Now," she said proudly, "our fairy tale is really starting." And it was. No magic wand, no spell, just a love that was real and hearts brave enough to begin again. 2 years passed. The Carter backyard still bloomed as beautifully as ever, but now it had a wooden swing hanging from the big tree, a family photo by the porch, and new laughter echoing through the garden. Noah, now 2 years old, was the newest addition to the family. He waddled through the grass with Lily circling around him like a little babysitter, arms ready to catch, shouting, "Noah, slow down, you'll fall." Grace sat nearby, holding a steaming cup of tea, her eyes following the 2 children. Every movement she made now held the quiet grace of a mother, steady, loving, unshaken. Daniel stepped out of the house, his apron dusted with flour. He had just finished baking. "Who wants chocolate chip cookies?" he called. Lily shouted first. Noah, by instinct, stumbled toward the voice, laughing loudly. Grace stood up, catching him as he toppled into her arms, smiling as he buried his head into her neck. None of them spoke about the past anymore. The pain, the doubts, the heartbreak. Not because they forgot, but because they had overcome it. Lily was now 6, clever, warm, always looking out for others. She knew how to comfort a friend who was sad, how to hold the hand of a new classmate on the first day, and how to say, I forgive, but I don't forget, so I can love better. Grace, who once thought she was only meant to care for other people's children, had become a mother in every sense. Not just to Lily, but to Noah too. And what brought her the deepest joy wasn't the title, but the truth that she no longer felt alone in the world. And Daniel, he had learned that success didn't live in deals, awards, or titles. It lived here, in this moment, with his daughter in one arm, his son in the other, and the woman he loved smiling in the afternoon light. Peace, he realized, wasn't something you had to chase far to find. It was here, in the place you return to, where someone waits, where laughter lives, where love stays, and where you, finally, are whole again, not because life was perfect, but because love, when chosen daily, had become enough.